This is Timothy Graham, and you're listening to our Under the Dome podcast. Today is Friday the 13th, and I need a little bit of luck. So I've called upon a couple of friends of mine over at the legislature. And by the way, they're friends of KNEA as well and friends of public education. So I think you're going to have a good time listening to them today. One of them is Nikki McDonald from Olathe, and the other one is Alexis Simmons from Topeka, both elected Democrats in the Kansas House of Representatives. I'm going to turn it over to each one of them to have them kind of give you an introduction of who they are and how they became legislators. Let's start with Nikki.
Okay. Nikki McDonald. I've lived in Olathe for 23 years and raised my two kids with my husband there through Olathe Public Schools. I'm a former teacher from Olathe. I taught at Fairview Elementary School and for a couple years in ELL. And then I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time. And I started to notice in the Brownback years, my kids' teachers were doing more with less, and class sizes were growing. And I had always voted, but I started to pay more attention to politics, and thankful to Brownback because that kind of got me involved in advocating for schools and paying a lot more attention. And I remember the first time I went to anything political. Mainstream Coalition held a informational meeting. I'm sure it was during the legislative session, and I thought when I went there, we'd be solving a problem, and it just was frustrating. Everyone was frustrated, and it was during the Brownback tax experiment. So fast forward, my kids were in middle school, and President Trump was elected, and I was so outraged that Betsy DeVos would be even considered to be a cabinet position. I literally was more qualified than Betsy DeVos, and yet she became in charge of our Department of Education, and things have gone downhill on a federal level since then. So I became more of an activist, focusing on public education funding. I created a nonprofit, Olathe Public Education Network, and we work to support candidates who share our values, prioritizing public education. And we also started testifying in Topeka during committee meetings. I remember the first time I came to testify in the entrance committee. I testified in person, and I really had no idea what I was getting myself into, but they were trying to put guns in our schools. And that's just a non-starter. Unless you're a licensed police officer, I don't see any reason to carry guns in our schools. So I went and testified on behalf of the second largest district in the state of Kansas, 30,000 students, in opposition for this. And so that was kind of the beginning of my activist journey. I've helped with campaigns over the years, and I found myself in the situation where my state rep stepped down. Brad Boyd is on our Olathe School District school board, but he was also my state representative for a year. And both of those positions, along with being a dad of 4, really were a little bit too much. So he resigned, and this is a really key moment for public education funding. And I know how to campaign, but I wasn't sure how to govern. But it was really important that we keep the seat. So I stepped in, filled that vacancy, and filed for re-election. And I have found it to be a really rewarding job. I didn't necessarily think I would like it, but I do. I wasn't sure if I'd be good at it, but I am. And it turns out there are a lot of people here who help us figure out how to govern. My district is a really purple place, but one thing that unites us is that we all believe public education is important, and we all are big fans of our schools, both Olathe and Blue Valley School District. And we all know that it's important to have good schools so that we have safe neighborhoods and good property value, and people want to live where we live. So really, I'm here so that we make sure that we fund our public schools, and I've positioned myself to be on the Education K-12 Budget Committee and the Education Funding Task Force, as well as the Literacy Advisory Committee, because literacy is a really important, timely issue here in Kansas. So that's kind of how I got here, and I like the job, so I'm going to keep doing it for a while, as long as they'll have me.
So, Nikki, there's a lot of folks that have, or everybody has a story on why they ran for election, right? And there's a lot of people that ran because of one issue. Now, I know you well enough and watch you on the floor and in your committee meetings to know that you're not a one-issue candidate or a one-issue legislator. But it's probably safe to say that education, the issue of education, public education, is what really lit the fire to get you to want to be up here and to put up with what you have to put up with up here, right?
I think that teachers put up with a lot. And, it's been a long time since I was in the K-12 classroom. I do teach adult ELL, but it's a little different with adults. But I decided when my kids were old enough to start going to school, I don't think I could be a K-12 teacher again. And so my penance for being unwilling to be a K-12 teacher in service to the teachers who have stepped up for my kids and made them stellar adults is to do this work so that I can try to make them have a safer work environment and just try to make their experience as positive as possible.
Yep. Well, I'm a witness, so I understand that you're doing exactly what you're telling everybody. Let's turn to Alexis. Alexis, you're from a different area of the state. You and Nikki have vastly different districts. Hers is a purple district, which, by the way, when I started up here 30 years ago, there was no such thing as a purple district in Johnson County. It was as red as it could be, with the exception of Sue Storm, who was able to get elected up in the very northeast corner of Johnson County. But outside of her little district, we were told not even to step in Johnson County as Democrats. Anyways, back to you, Alexa. You're in a very, very blue district. You replaced Victor W. Miller, is that correct?
It is.
Vic Miller, who was also a friend of education and a friend of KNEA and a friend of mine most of the time. But so, why don't you give us a little bit of an explanation or an introduction to yourself?
Yeah, well, thank you for having us, Tim.
Yeah.
I've been up here for a long time in different capacities. I got interested in politics when I was very young. My grandmother founded Women for Kansas.
What's her name?
Lynn Steffen.
Yes.
Yeah. And when I was 14, she said, "Hey girl, you're coming with me." And she made me help her plan what was, at the time, the first anti-brownback women's convention. And that was fantastic. It got me so interested in the political atmosphere generally. But at the same time that was happening, I was attending Wichita East High School in USD 259 in Wichita. And I remember getting home, and we would have been unable to use a textbook that day. I remember specifically in a sociology class, we were unable to use the textbook because it was so old. It was out of date, it was irrelevant. And that same evening, my step-siblings, who went to Andover High School just up the road, were telling us about some new chemistry lab that was coming to their school. And I didn't understand how they could go to school 15 minutes away and have a completely different educational experience from me. And because my family was fairly political, they explained it. And they explained, well, the state is in charge of that. It's based on things like your individual property wealth. And as I got older, I thought, someone should fix that. So I decided to go to Washburn for a degree in political science. I picked Washburn because it was in Topeka. And I thought if I'm serious about getting into politics, I need to be thoughtful about where I'm putting my time and where I'm getting my education. And it was at Washburn that I met Tim in my first legislative internship.
Well, let's be clear. You didn't meet me at Washburn. I was not hanging around the colleges at this time. But go again.
Good clarification. I was hired as Senator Anthony Hensley's intern, and Tim was Senator Hensley's chief of staff at the time. And so I got to know Tim in that capacity at the same time. And
Hold on, but were you really scared of me? You told me the other day you were scared of me.
Yeah, I was. You're an intimidating guy,
No,
Tim.
goodness.
It makes you good at your job.
No, okay. All right.
Yeah, it was a good first exposure to the real life world of politics, that you have to be tough and you can't have a thin skin. And you got to take it on the chin and keep moving forward. And that's what I learned from you. And the others in the office, Ann Ma and Lauren Tice Miller were also in there, who I know are well acquainted with KNEA. So after I graduated from Washburn, I knew I loved the legislature. I was still floored by the inequities that were in our school system. And so I chose to move to Washington, D.C. for a master's degree in American government to keep studying. And while I was there, I worked at the Women in Politics Institute doing a nonpartisan newsletter that amplified all of the news from across the country about women in politics. while I was doing that, I also helped to train women to run for office and dabbled in some DEI consulting for corporations, but I realized I'm not into that. I like the people aspect of politics very much. So when I finished my master's degree, which was a fantastic experience, I was there during President Trump's first term, and it was such an intellectually stimulating environment to study in, to work in, to make friends in. I moved home and immediately came back to the legislature because that had been my goal. My goal had been to come back and pour back into my community. So I worked for about 4 years as the communications director for the Kansas House Democratic leader and the Kansas House Democratic Caucus. And through that, I really honed my policy knowledge, my understanding, my working knowledge of the legislative process. And so when a position opened up to run for the House, I felt very well prepared. While I serve, I'm also an adjunct professor of government at Washburn, and I'm a teacher in the Topeka Public Schools District with TCALC, the Topeka Center for Advanced Learning and Careers. Specifically there, I teach a class to a group of students trying to be educators. Their goal is to get out of high school with some experience under the belt, and I teach their government class. So that's my background. Suffice to say, I've had a lot of hands-on experience, which has been helpful and simultaneously unhelpful in some surprising ways. But I love it. I absolutely love it. When people say at work, "How are you doing?" Some people respond, "Oh, I'm living the dream," and they're being sarcastic, but I'm not.
So you like being here?
Oh, I love it.
Even in the face of the odds being against a Democrat in the legislature, it's really hard to get anything that you want. A lot of times, the only victories that Democrats seem to get is stopping bad things from happening, which is equally as important as getting things passed and getting things done. But
yeah,
you're enjoying it.
Oh yeah, man. I mean,
so you're not going to give your seat back to Vic. You're not going to let Vic. You're not going to let Vic come.
No way.
Okay.
No way.
All
If Vic called me and said, "Give it back," I would laugh in his face just like that.
Do you think Vic could beat you in a primary? No, I'm just kidding.
I'll tell him, "Vic, if you're listening, you couldn't."
I hope he does listen. Nikki, let's go back to you for a second.
Okay.
We talk a lot about what it means to be a pro-education legislator and a pro-teacher legislator. What does that mean to you?
Well, I want to make a distinction. I am an unapologetic pro-public school educator. I think that
that's right. I was supposed to say that.
I think in this building, many people get away with saying, well, we're pro-education, but they're not always pro-public education.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and I think if we don't make that distinction every time we talk about it in this building, then some people get away with... people hear what they want to hear, right? And they see what they want to see. And so I want to be really clear that public schools are for the public good. Education is an equalizer. It's a path of upward mobility, and it's a way that each of us individually can become self-sufficient and also give back to society. I have 2 kids I'm trying to raise, and I want them to be not just happy, but, successful taxpayers who, when they go vote, they make an informed decision at the ballot, and I want them to give back, use their talents for good. And so I think that a good educator and a good legislator tries to set people up for success, but we also need to meet people where they are. And so I worry that private schools don't necessarily always have to meet kids where they are. If they don't fit their criteria, they can dismiss them or not even accept them. But public schools,
have to serve everybody.
Yeah, and we should, right? It's everyone should be entitled to.
And when you make the distinction that you are pro public education, you're not saying that you're anti-private education by any means.
No,
nobody is.
I just think public dollars go to public schools, and I am here to craft policy for public schools.
Yes.
And so, our job isn't necessarily to tell teachers what they need to teach. Our job is to fund education. That is in the Constitution. That's the one job we have, is to pass a budget. And education budget is a big part of that, and rightfully so. This is our investment in our future as Kansans, and as a parent, as a neighbor. I want to make sure that everybody in my community, and And on these budget committees for schools and school funding, I don't just think about Olathe and Blue Valley schools. Although those are important to me, the decisions I make on these committees are really impacting every kid in Kansas. And every kid in Kansas deserves a world-class education. And so I used to try to impact policy as an activist. And when I had a chance to actually make policy, I didn't necessarily feel like it was something I could pass up. And so while I'm here, I intend to make the most of that time and try to get things done. And, in this building, Alexis can attest to this, we don't always get credit for the things we do, but the more important thing is that we get things done.
So today you are substituting on the House Education Committee.
True.
But as you mentioned earlier, you are a member of the House Education Budget Committee. Can you tell our listeners the difference between the two?
Well, when I first got this job, I got this job and I just insisted that they put me on the K-12 Budget Committee, not the Education Committee. Because in 2024 and in recent years, prior to that, all of the policy for education in this building was tied to dollars. And so I wanted to impact policy. And in the Education Committee, it seemed like they just talked about stuff, but the real meat of things went through the Education K-12 Budget Committee in 2024 when I was appointed. Well, I was appointed in 23, but anyways, when I started in 2024. And in that committee, I have testified before very contentiously. I have drug people through the mud for their votes online, and then I turned around and here I am in that committee with the chair of my committee who I've drugged through the mud before. At that time, the chair was Christy Williams, and I will tell you, she is acidic at times, right? She is caustic in a committee, and there were many times when I was gavelled and told, you have to call me Madam Chair, and you can only ask one question, you can't interrupt. And as a new legislator, especially someone who came in midstream, we aren't necessarily taught all of these rules.
Yeah.
But I felt that in that committee there was a lack of respect for teachers, for other pro-public education
now,
legislators.
Christy says she was a teacher.
Yes, sure. Christy Williams, Representative Christy Williams, was a teacher just like I was. But I think our experiences must have been different. Certainly our takeaways are different. And in this building, I have seen her vilify teachers at times. And I'm not going to say that she, has ill intent. She must have reasons for some of the stances she's taken. But, she and I have different approaches in this building. And I think it's important that we treat each other with respect and dignity. And the guests who come and our conferees, I think if they take the time to come here and share their expertise or their opinions, we should give them the respect that they deserve. And so I have not always seen that when she was chairing the Education K-12 Budget Committee. But then the next year in 2025 and this year in 2026, we have a different chair in the K-12 Budget Committee. And in his first day, his name's Representative Jason Getz from Dodge City. The first day he said that he really wanted us to be respectful of each other and bring our perspectives, but he lets everyone speak. I never feel called out or talked down to, and it has just been a breath of fresh air. But another change that they made is in 2025 and 26, policy is not coming through the K-12 Budget Committee as much. Now it's starting to come through the Education Committee.
Which is what it was originally tended to be.
And I think it's better that way. We should not tie dollar strings to policy, right? You shouldn't, force people to vote for a budget that has bad things attached to it. So I think that has been a positive change over the last 2 years. But it has meant that I have not been on the committee to make education policy as often.
You don't always get to be in the fun debates, is what you're saying, right?
Well, during the Education Committee, I am having fun debates in the Health and Human Services Committee,
Okay.
so I enjoy that committee as well. But
Are those the only...
I also am on legislative modernization with Alexis. She's
Okay.
the ranking member in that committee, and we work on cybersecurity and AI and
Oh, boy.
just try to modernize things around here.
So there has been changes. You feel like it's a better committee now with
Much.
the chairman. The chairman just makes all the difference in the world sometimes, right?
100%.
They set the tone. They set the expectations.
They set the agenda.
They set the agenda.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. And obviously, I've been up there as well. I see everything that you've seen, and I agree with you. It's a much better committee to be in. It's a much better committee to testify in front of, and it's also a committee that we can make suggestions in, and sometimes we can actually get some small victories for education by just treating each other with respect, right?
You know, one of the most pivotal conversations I had in this building was in the beginning when Jason Getz took over that chairmanship. He pulled me aside when I was frustrated about something, and he said, if you would just come to me with some solutions, then we could work together and get things done. And so I really took that to heart, and I really started to try to focus on solutions rather than, being so angry.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think it's easier? I mean, I have a strong opinion on this, but I'm going to let you answer this. You think it's easier to actually get change by talking privately, giving them a heads up on the things you want, as opposed to just springing it on them as an amendment at the last minute?
I would say that would probably be their preferred method, and if my hope was that I would get an amendment on something and I wanted success, then that would probably be my approach. But I try to not tell other legislators how they should do their job because, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. And in this building, our opportunities for success are sometimes few and far between. Sometimes an opportunity is just to make sure that the public understands what's happening. And so, that can be uncomfortable, but transparency is really important, and I think that we just have to be pretty frank in this job. There's no sense in sugarcoating things. So
let's turn to you, Alexa.
Try that again, Alexis.
Alexa, please.
My dad does that to me all the time, Tim. Everyone in my life, Amazon ruined my name.
You can actually keep that in. That's a good good outtake.
That's real.
Alexis, who I've known for a long time, and I do know your name. What does it mean to be a pro-education legislator?
I think this is a great question.
Public education, by the way.
There you go.
Yeah, okay. I think this is a great question. I guess you would only ask great questions. But I think, especially in this America that we are in right now, education is a foundation for people to build their lives off of. And whether or not you have access to that education is dependent on things that you have no control over when you're born. And the role of public education is to guarantee that every person in this country has the opportunity to pursue prosperity and to pursue the American dream. Frankly, as laughable as it sounds at this moment in 2026, even talking about the American dream, you cannot talk about it without talking about access to quality public education.
That's right.
I was raised up on stories about my family's immigration from Lebanon, and so much of that was the unbelievable lack of education that my great-great-grandmother had when she came here. When she arrived in Wichita at the time, she had an 8th grade education, and she and her husband had a small grocery store, and they worked their butts off to get their 3 kids through school, through the public education system. And one of them went on to be the longest serving attorney general in Kansas history, Bob Steffen, and the other one owned one of the largest regional advertising agencies in the United States. And that would not have happened but for access to quality public education. So I think when we're going to talk about issues of poverty or issues of criminal justice, every policy issue that comes through this building is tied to education access, and public education access in particular.
So Bob Steffen was your grandfather?
He was my great uncle.
Great uncle.
Mm-hmm. And when I told him I wanted to go into politics, I'll never forget, he laughed in my face and he said, "Girl, why?"
Okay, so, Bob had a long and storied career, and he got beat up a little bit too. But, so he must have been your grandfather's brother.
That's right.
So, not to make this about me, but you talked about how you were involved in politics as a kid. So was I. And I used to write letters and make phone calls. And did you know that Bob Steffen called me at home in Salina, Kansas when I was about 8 years old? And he talked to me on the phone. I invited him to come to a Boy Scout picnic. And he said, well, they've got me they've got me scheduled until June. That was his nice way of putting me down or letting me down. But I also got to spend some time with him up here in fourth grade when I was shadowed Jack Breyer. And Bob Steffen come walking out, and I was so excited because at that time, Bob Steffen was one of the few people that I'd actually met that I'd seen on TV. So I didn't know that there was that connection. If you had told me that earlier, I have forgotten. So that's really cool.
I hear stories like that all the time, and I appreciate hearing them because what it does is remind me that the political climate we exist in is not permanent. It's far from it.
I hope you're right. Mm-hmm. I hope you're right. We've all seen that change. I've been up here for about 28 years altogether, and I've seen it change a lot. What about you, Nikki? What have you seen change since you started as an advocate several years ago?
It's interesting. One of the reasons I decided to speak up and start speaking out is because I saw that we were teaching or treating our teachers without respect and not treating them as professionals. When I was a classroom teacher, I remember I mostly have taught in low-income schools with high immigrant populations, and I'd have parent-teacher conferences, and it would be really stark. I might have a average family come, and the teacher kind of question, like, if I would give a little constructive criticism for their kid. I felt like more often than not, parents might, like regular American non-immigrant parents, might question my judgment, right, and say, well, my kid, blah, blah, blah. Whereas when I had immigrant families come, if the first thing they really wanted to know was, is my child respectful to you? Mm-hmm. And if they were, I would always try to start with that because that's what they wanted to hear. And if I gave them advice, it was gospel because I'm the one who has a master's degree in this, right? I'm the professional. I have seen that erode over time. Yeah. And I feel like during COVID, in the beginning, I was so glad that people were starting to really appreciate teachers for the work that they do because they were having their kids at home and they're starting to realize, wow, how are they doing this all day with 30 of these kids, right? But pretty quickly the tide turned, just like with nursing. We're so thankful for our nurses until we're not. And so I think so often, out of sight, out of mind, our kids are tucked away at school. But real teachers every day are the ones who are, taking them as they come. And so we just want to maximize the growth and potential in every kid. And I want to make sure that the average Joe in this building understands you wouldn't question your attorney or your physician. Why are you coming in and belittling teachers in a committee meeting? It's not acceptable. So
that's interesting. The dynamic you explained about the children of immigrants and how respectful they are in the classroom and in the school setting. That's a story that I've heard several times from other people, other teachers. That is so much they love, they respect, and they feel so fortunate to be part of the American public education system.
Well, and even in the community college where I teach adult ELL, which is all voluntary, like they pay some money for the books, but the community college and our taxpayer dollars supplement that teaching. In this climate, I think if I were an immigrant, I would be so frustrated. I don't see any of that. They are grateful to be here. They are taking advantage of every opportunity. These are people who are engineers in their home country and they've fled with the clothes on their backs, 36-hour train and plane rides to get here with nothing and their children. And so they're just grateful to be here. They're working, menial jobs, getting up early in the morning, getting their kids to school, working all day, getting their kids home and fed, coming and spending 3 hours with me in the evenings, and doing homework on top of that with a smile on their faces. So, immigrants give me hope. I think diversity is absolutely our strength in this country and certainly in my community. And, I don't understand the vilification that I'm seeing these days.
Well, yeah. Well, I think we all kind of understand how bad it is and what fuels it. There's a lot of different corners, but I want to talk about vilification of teachers, right? Yeah. So the dynamic you explained about how appreciative a lot of the students are is again, like I said, one that we hear,
too.
and their parents, yes, that we hear from several educators and teachers. Why is it the rest of us, why do we take so many pot shots at our public schools all the time? Why does it feel like public schools are always under attack, and public school teachers? Why?
I think most voters, most residents are not opposed to public schools or public school teachers. I think frustrated people who are parents are probably just trying to live their life, pay their bills. A lot of people are working 2 jobs. When I knock doors, and house is nicer than mine, 3-car garage, what I hear people say is, I can't afford my kids' soccer anymore. My parents just moved back in with me. My teenage kids can't get a job that pays enough for them to live on their own. People are frustrated right now. There are a lot of economic factors. I don't know what the answer is, but I think that sometimes we, as teachers, take the brunt of frustrations. And that's not fair. But I think that it's really important that families try to take on that teamwork approach, right? So I have a son with special needs, and yes, he has an IEP, and yes, we have a whole team of professionals, but I'm also on that team, and I'm one of the most important members of that team.
So parents have a lot of rights in public schools.
Absolutely.
The teachers work overtime and beyond the call of duty to make sure parents are involved.
Absolutely. That's been my experience. And any concern I have has been heard, met, worked through. I think it's really important that we all work to have, whether I'm talking about parents and teachers or legislators and constituents, we have to try to have conversations rather than confrontations. When we listen, we need to listen for understanding and not for rebuttal, so that we can truly hear each other. And so that is what I have tried really hard to do. And I've also tried to not assume ill intent when I'm having interactions with people, even Representative Christy Williams, who I have tangled with a time or two. I think she's probably here to do good, right? Like, I think we all are. It's just we have different perspectives and different approaches. And so, I'm going to do what I can do that's within my sphere of influence, right? But if I can have conversations and try to make sure that I'm a human to my coworkers, they're less likely to vilify me. If they know they've had dinner with me and my kids, right? Then they know I'm a human and I'm a mom. Gotcha.
No, that's great advice. And it's very close to what we try to tell members when they come up here. Try to make those relationships. Try to look past some of the stuff, because at the end of the day, the best way to get things done up here is have those relationships.
Yeah.
Because you can't shame people up here into doing the right thing. You could do that 20 years ago. In politics, it doesn't work anymore because there's not a lot of shame out there in some of the people that are in elected positions on both sides of the aisle.
I do think if we could pivot a little bit to special ed funding, we have had some success shaming some Johnson County elected officials into voting to help us better fund public education when it comes to special ed in the last couple weeks. Those amendments have failed, but I did notice some...
How's the vote count?
I have slept since then, but I really looked to see which vulnerable Republicans in particular in Johnson County were with us or not with us. And I was pleasantly surprised that, a few of the key ones, not all of them, but a few of them did come our way on special ed. Some of them have special needs children or grandchildren. We all have a different approach. And there's scarcity in this budget, right? It is tight. But we can afford what we prioritize. And I proposed an amendment in the Education K-12 Budget Committee to get us to 92%, and my amendment was $225 million, and that was laughed off. And we ended up with 10 in the House's budget, $10 million instead of $225 million. I mean, that's insulting.
And the Senate's even less.
Yeah.
Alexis, how you doing over there?
Good.
What do you think is the reason why public schools and public school teachers feel like they're always under attack?
Because they are.
That's pretty blunt, right?
I mean, it's the truth. For as long as I can remember, since I became politically aware, public schools were villainized. I'll try not to get too wonky, but as you were talking, I thought about the American National Election Studies did a survey in the 1970s that showed a growing frustration among the American voting populace with a lack of social mobility and socioeconomic mobility. And I think that reflects a changing relationship that the American people have with the government and the services that the government provides. People feel like they are paying into a system that's not giving back what they believe that it should. And I think public education is one area of government that touches almost everyone in society. And it becomes a really easy and convenient target when people feel like they're paying taxes and they're not getting their potholes fixed or they're not getting services met. And then they send their kid to school and their kid comes home and is frustrated with something that happened. That is suddenly the easiest place for them to express that frustration. And I don't think it's intentional. I don't think people realize that it's misplaced anger, but it's a convenient one. And public schools are not in a position to hit back. They're not in a position to defend themselves. And so I think it becomes a very convenient political hit.
Yeah, our members feel that way a lot. They feel that they're attacked. They don't feel comfortable in pushing back. Mm-hmm. They're afraid of the consequences, either from administrators or even from locally elected people now that seem to be trolling people looking to cancel them. Mm-hmm. We all live in a cancel culture these days. I want to throw out a conspiracy theory that I have, but I think it's more than just a conspiracy. I think there's a lot of credence to this. Do either one of you think that one of the big reasons that public schools seem to be attacked a lot in the legislature is because they're trying to make a case for vouchers and sending public money to private schools?
I have no doubt that that's the goal, because if they acknowledge that public schools are capable and competent, it totally diminishes the need to be investing in private schools. I went to a charter school, I went to a private school, and I went to a public school. And without question, my experience in the public school was head and shoulders better than the charter and the private school. No disrespect to the people there who choose to send their kids to those schools, but in my personal experience, I was exposed to so much more educationally and experienced so much more social development in a public school than I saw my peers experiencing in the charter and the private school. And I think that if those experiences are elevated and shared, it totally undercuts any real argument for a private school. And if you're going to talk about vouchers, which is quite literally siphoning money away from public schools into private schools, you better have a good reason to do it. And I think they try to create that. I don't think they're particularly successful in doing so, but they work very hard to justify that siphoning by framing public education and public schools as though they're a failure. Yeah. And it's just not accurate.
So it fits the narrative, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like you see that that underlying theme in several different bills, and even in bills that may not be obvious.
If I can, Tim, one more thing. I remember when I was, I actually don't know if I was an intern or if I was a staffer, but I remember sitting in, I believe it was K-12 budget, and watching the chairwoman just talk to teachers like they were scum off the bottom of her shoe. They were talking about teacher retention and teacher recruitment, and she very explicitly said that they were the reason teachers were quitting. She openly said, maybe they're quitting because they don't like you. And I just thought, not only is that abusive from a chairwoman to a conferee generally, but from a public servant to a public school teacher, I thought that's so wildly inappropriate and arrogant. I think arrogance fuels a lot of this too. So I think that's really important to acknowledge that it's not just the policy pieces, it's the personal engagements that some legislators here have with public school teachers when they come to the building and they try to respectfully advocate. This attitude is pervasive outside of the text and legislation.
I think in Johnson County, and probably more broadly, there's a religious element to this. We have some really great private schools in Johnson County, but we have some exceptional public schools too. And when you take taxpayer dollars, whether it's a religious public school or a religious private school, or non-religious private school, that really does undermine and undercut the resources available to the public schools. And very, very often when a kid goes to a private school, particularly if they have special needs, they end up back in the public school behind. And so I think it's really important that we separate we need to keep religion out of our government for sure, but I think that not all of my coworkers agree with that. So we don't live in a theocracy, but a lot of the people here that I work with seem to think we do.
Interesting. Well, we're probably getting to the part of the podcast, so we need to start wrapping up. I could be here all day. I know both of you could be here all day, and I've really enjoyed the conversation, but Nikki has to get to committee, and Ann Bush, our communications director, she's got a real job too that she's got to do back at headquarters, and Robin Bonsall, who's also here helping. Thank you guys for being over here.
You.
We're at the State House, and they have set our recording apparatus up over here, and they're a big reason why we get to listen to these every week, and we get to sit here and pontificate. But I want to make sure that our members get to know you guys even better by following you both on social media. Nikki, tell us about how they can follow you.
Well, I'm pretty good about updating Facebook, especially during the session. You'll see all of the groups and people who come visit me. If you'd like to be on my newsletter list, you can just send me a note, but you can find me on Facebook at McDonald for Kansas, and my website is also McDonaldforKansas.com. That's MC and the word FOR for Kansas. So, yeah, thanks.
Alexis, which, by the way, Alexis has been in the news lately for some really fun activity in one of your committees that if they go to your website or they go to your Facebook page, they can probably find out what I'm talking about. So that's a little teaser.
Oh, yeah.
But tell us how to follow you.
I'm on Facebook as State Representative Alexis Simmons, and my website is simmonsforkansas.org. 4 is spelled out. And if I may channel my inner comms director, please, please, please support the news. Subscribe to your local newspaper. Subscribe to the Kansas Reflector, who does not require a paywall if that's a concern. We have to be doing that. That's a fundamental part of the work that we're discussing here today, but also in supporting our democracy. So you can find it absolutely on my personal pages, but I would implore all of us to also chip in supporting our local news.
I'm going to give both of you a little bit of time to give some last thoughts and some closing remarks. Before I do that, I want to remind you both that we're going to have several teachers, hopefully a couple hundred teachers, that are going to be in the building next week on St. Patrick's Day. Mm-hmm. You should have received an invitation to come have lunch with them and also attend the rally that will follow. So will you guys be able to make it? Hopefully, at least to some of that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So teachers that are listening to this, look them up because they'll be here
and
to eat with us.
And our office is 43 South in the basement, so you can also swing by and say hello.
Yeah. It's hard to find, but it's really cool and cozy down there in the basement. That's a whole other story of how they made this building so much better. The basement where you guys are, when I started...
It's the best kept secret.
Yeah, it would have been very hard to get to. But Nikki, give us some final remarks, some closing thoughts, some wisdom.
Well, I'm not a one-trick pony, so I'm going to invite myself back later to talk about not just education funding and the task force work, but I also want to talk a little bit about the future and AI and how that interacts with education.
Oh, so you want to join us again on the podcast?
I would love that. Yes, thanks so much for the invite. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good.
Yeah. And so, I'm grateful for the opportunity to visit always. I mean, I'm a former member of KNEA. There have been times when, you'll love this. There have been times in my teaching career when I could afford dues for the union, and there have been times when I couldn't. But the times when I couldn't afford them are the times when I had aggravated arson in my classroom and things like that. So those things would have gone down a lot differently had I been a member of the union.
So the message is,
if you can afford to do those dues, I mean, that particular year, I should have afforded it because the implications were pretty expensive for myself. Yeah. So I appreciate the work that the union does. I think it's really important, not just the collective bargaining aspects of teaching, but just making sure we might have insurance through the district or whatever to hire attorneys if something bad happens. But at the end of the day, those attorneys are working for the school district, and NEA attorneys are working for the teachers. So that's a really, really important.
That's a great plug.
Well, it's a really important thing that I'm not sure all
but
new.
You're right. You're absolutely. You're 100%.
I'm not sure all new educators understand the degree to which bad things can go wrong through no fault of yours. And so the union's always got your back. Are
you running for re-election?
I am on the ballot.
Have you filed?
I filed last October. We had a big kickoff. Sharice Davids came and introduced me. And my race is probably the number one most targeted race in the legislature as far as...
They're coming at you?
Yeah, they're coming for me.
Why?
Because I only won by 148 votes last time.
Well, okay, sure. They're looking at those numbers. But they're also coming at you probably because you can be a burr in their saddle.
I don't mind speaking truth to power.
Yeah.
And I think I'm not here to make friends necessarily. I'd like to treat everyone with respect, but I think at the end of the day, I'm here to get things done. And sometimes things just need to be said. So I don't mind confrontation, but I'd rather have a conversation.
All right. Well, thank you, Nikki. Alexis, I'm going to add one other name to that list of KNEA folks that you've worked closely with.
Ethel.
Yeah.
I was just sitting here thinking, as my final thoughts, Ethel Edwards is my campaign treasurer, and I met her when I was a staffer for the House Democrats. Ethel, I cannot say enough positive things about Ethel's work, both in public education policy here in the legislature, but in our community at large. When I wanted to run, I had a lot of insecurities, despite having quite literally gone through candidate training myself and training others. I thought, I don't know if I am ready to do this. And Ethel looked at me and she said, Alexis, get it together, sister. And
talk about tough.
Yes. That's right. She's a fantastic mentor to me and to so many people.
Alexis, did you know my treasurer is retired Olathe NEA president Kathy Meyer?
No.
So I didn't know
very nice.
Educators as treasurers.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So
give us some parting wisdom.
Yeah. Okay. So this is an election year, and
are you running?
I am indeed running for re-election, and I think I'm going to get on my soapbox for just a second. I think a lot of voters in Kansas don't realize that in the state legislature there are, oh my gosh, a dozen races decided by double-digit numbers, and when it comes down to things like sustaining a veto or beating a constitutional amendment down, I cannot say how important those roles are. I believe House District 15 was flipped from Democrat to Republican by only 14 votes in the last election. House District 102 was our rural most...
Where
that's in Olathe.
Okay.
I believe Lauren Bohai currently holds the seat, and Allison Hoagland is running to take it back. House District 102 in Hutchinson was our most rural district in the House Democrats, and that went down.
That was Jason Probst.
It was. And he kept that seat for multiple cycles, winning by...
What did he won by like 12 votes once?
Yes. Yeah. And Jeff Pittman in the state Senate just lost a couple of years ago by 31 votes. So when you're sitting at home or you're talking to your friends and your family and they're, maybe they believe they want to vote, they have a plan to get out and vote, you got to drag them to the polls. You have to make sure that people vote, because in some of these districts, those 1, 2, 3 votes across a district make a tangible difference in what policy goes into law. I cannot say that enough, and we see it every election year.
And that's important also in Republican primaries too, because there was a time, and I think there still is a time, to be honest with you, where there were several Republicans that were pro-public education and built coalitions up here to do really good things, and KNEA backed a lot of pro-education, public education Republicans in past years, and we are wanting them to come our way as well, so we can continue to back them, because we need a coalition, right?
We need more teachers to run. And
Yes.
this is the time to make those decisions. The filing deadline's generally at the very beginning of June.
It is June 1st of this year.
Okay.
That's
there you go.
that's my birthday.
Hey, happy early
Okay,
birthday,
yeah.
Tim.
Yeah,
But
and it's
you
not
gonna
any.
run?
It's not any of my passwords either. For anybody that's thinking to go hack me.
Well,
no, I'm not going to.
You
run.
don't have to be an expert. We are a citizen legislature. We come from all different walks of life. But I will tell you, I would really like some more educator colleagues so that they could help us fight harder for public education and ultimately for our kids.
Well, I think that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, on that note, if anyone wants to run, you might like to know that the statistic is women have to be asked an average of 7 times to run for office. So if you have been told you should run for office and you've come up with every reason under the sun not to do it,
Yeah, so I believe you.
I'm
I know
skeptical.
I know you're well versed on the facts and figures that you put out, but I can tell you this: I've recruited a lot of candidates over the years, and it's usually the dudes that can't make up their mind, the dudes that have 1,000 excuses on why they can't do it, and a lot of times they blame it on their wives. And it's been the women that have been ready to go, including Laura Kelly, who I got to, I talked on another podcast about how I got to pretend at least that I was part of that recruitment team, but she had already pretty much been recruited by her neighbor, Kathleen Sebelius. But my point is that the women, in my experience, haven't been hard to recruit because they're ready to go and they know how important it is. So
Well, it took a whole lot of convincing for me to do it. It
Really?
pretty much was like desperate times called for desperate measures. But it happened at a time in my life when my kids were old enough. The timing was right. But I did not ever intend to be an elected official. But I'm glad I am. It worked out.
Well, I personally am glad both of you are where you're at, and I know that our members and our association is very glad as well to have friends like you in the Kansas legislature. I'm going to take you both up on coming back. I think we could talk about the elections too, maybe over the summer. And we're hoping to grow our podcast into other directions. So I am going to ask you guys back. I hope that works. I know you've already volunteered, Alexis. I know you'll.
Heck
I know
yeah,
you'll
man.
do it. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But I want to appreciate everybody. Again, Ann for being over here and Robin for being over here, and both these great Democratic representatives for this time on Friday the 13th when they could have been eating or could have been just resting, because I know we're all exhausted. So thanks again for being here, and you'll hear from us soon, folks.
Thanks, Tim.
Have a good day.